Okay, it's time to stop the presses. You got to put down whatever you're doing because today we're doing an emergency repair. Hello everybody, welcome back to The Hobby Musician. I apologize if I alarmed anyone earlier, but I am serious. Today we got to do an emergency repair on my main primary 5-string bass. This is the instrument that I have had the longest. This is my baby. And yesterday as I was practicing, she suffered a casualty. Now to set the stage of what we're going to do, imagine this. I was practicing, I was working on some new music, I was recording, and I was really getting into it. And sometimes when I really get into the moment, I kind of lose myself and I lost track of time. But somewhere in the middle of one track, it dawned on me that I kind of have been here a long time. And when I checked the time, I realized I was terribly late. I had to get somewhere really fast, so I was in a panic. You gotta understand, when I'm doing recording and stuff, it's quite an elaborate setup. I've got software on the computer that's running, I've got studio monitors and amp, I got the Helix running. There's a lot of stuff that I have to turn on to get a session going, but there's also a lot of stuff that I have to close down, save. So when I discovered that I was running late, I went into a panic. I started trying to, closed all my software with one hand. I was reaching over trying to turn off the Helix, turn off the monitors with the other hand. And in the panic, I grabbed the bass and I kind of forcefully placed / threw the bass onto my rack. And I had forgotten that the bass was still plugged in. My instrument cable was still in the jack, and when I went to slam it down into the rack, the bar that runs along the bottom of the rack hit the instrument cable, and it torqued it at an angle, and it stripped out the screw that holds the input jack plate on. Now, this is not good because every time you plug in and unplug an instrument cable, you gotta have a little bit of stability here so that that actual connector, the connection there, stays stationary. You want it to click in and click out without this moving. But now with this faceplate screw, you can kind of hear that tapping. That's because it's just loose. With that faceplate loose, now if I try to plug in and unplug, it actually wrenches away and that cable kind of hesitates and it gets stuck a little bit in there, which is not good for a long-term kind of situation to leave go. So today we are going to do a patch job repair. We are going to pull out the screw and I'm going to show you a very, very low-tech and very conditional repair method that we can do with this. Now, I want to be clear about what we're going to show you today. I am not recommending this as a hands-down solution for every time there's a problem with a wooden component on one of your instruments. No, there are some very clear requirements for us to be able to do this. Number one, this cannot be anything cosmetic. If you have a nick or a cut in an instrument that's going to be seen and you want it to cosmetically look good, do not do this approach. Number two, it cannot be anything absolutely structural. For example, if there was something wrong with a neck joint, like damage to a neck joint or something that is very important for the structure of the instrument, you can't do it. And number three, this has to be like super unimportant. It has to be under the surface. It has to be moderately, unessential to the functioning of the instrument. And fortunately for us, this particular project checks all those boxes. All this screw does is hold on a faceplate. It has another screw to help it, so that kind of lessens the burden. But those are kind of the three conditions. This is a really low-tech patch. And the patch that we're going to use is we are going to use literal sawdust, just pure sawdust, and some super glue. And we're going to make a slurry, a sawdust super glue slurry down in that hole that will solidify up and reconstitute that cavity. And then we're going to re-drill the hole for the screw to sit in once that sawdust glue mixture hardens. Now, when I say sawdust, I literally mean sawdust. I was outside once this happened and I realized that I needed to fix it right away. I just went outside, I grabbed some scrap wood. You can see in the time lapse, I'm just out there. I just put the saw blade at about a 1/2 inch. I wasn't even trying to cut through the wood. I was just trying to cut, zip, zip, zip. And then when I would get a decent pile of sawdust, I would scoop it up and put it in my little Ziploc baggie. I just grabbed then the super glue that I needed, and I brought a nail, and the only thing this nail is going to let us do is once we get the screws out of this, what you can imagine is when the screw strips away all the threads that it's holding into, it essentially leaves a cylindrical cavity. Now it doesn't go all the way through the body, so we don't need to take off the back plate or anything like that. So it's kind of like a cup. Just imagine a cup with a bottom and the sides. We need to fill that cup with the sawdust, and as we go, we need to put a couple drops of super glue, push it down, tap it down, and that's what the nail is for. Then we're going to put more sawdust and more super glue and tap it down. That's what we got this for. So to get started, I'm going to take out the good screw, the screw that didn't get damaged, which still comes out with a screwdriver, fortunately. And we're going to put that off to the side. And like I said, the other screw, this screw got stripped. So the screwdriver, it's just going to spin in place. So I had to bring pliers for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to push down the plate and just get the edges. I might actually have to pull up on this plate to get it started a little bit. Yep, there it was. So now that I got edges of the screw exposed, I pull out the screw with the pliers. And that is never, if you've done any kind of work, woodwork, carpentry, if you're pulling out screws with pliers, something's wrong. So I'll put my 2 screws over there to the side. And all I'm gonna do, you can see here, I'm just turning the faceplate to the side. I don't need to remove this. I don't need to get crazy about it. It's this hole up here that I need to fill with my sawdust and put my drops of super glue in there to get that ready for re-drilling. And so here's what I'm going to do. I brought some tweezers. These are very, very fine pointed tweezers. And with my bag of sawdust open here, let me just get this going. With my bag of sawdust open, I'm just going to take my tweezers and kind of carefully take pinches of sawdust and put it down into the cavity. And when I get a few pinches in there, I'm going to pause and I'm going to put a drop of super glue down there and tap it all down with the nail. So I'm going to get that sawdust kind of pooled up down here, and I'm going to get a pinch of it. And the good news about this, the fine teeth of this, is that it really allows me, I can kind of very accurately aim where this sawdust is going. And so I'm not really in danger of getting big messy piles of things. Oh, there's a big piece of sawdust. I'm not really in danger of getting too big of a messy pile of stuff going on. And so I've got maybe a couple more pinches. Couple more pinches of sawdust in there, and then I'm going to first I'm going to tap it down with my nail. And I picked a nail. I went down, I just had kind of an assortment of leftover nails from other projects, and I just wanted to make sure that I had a nail that was about the same size as the hole, so we don't have sawdust coming up the sides if you're trying to push it down in the middle. I got lucky. This nail is just about the exact same size as the hole. There we go. And so I've tapped down just that first pass of sawdust. Now I'm just going to come and I'm going to try to get maybe one drop of super glue down there before I repeat the process. So depending on the type of super glue you have here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to tip this down just a little bit more to get the angle. There we go. I want to get this a little more horizontal, so that when I can really just control that drop of super glue down into our hole, almost there. There we go. Got it. And then what that will do, that will kind of slide down the sides, kind of sliding down those sides as we go. And it will, I can even take my nail and kind of help get the air bubbles out. And once you kind of get the air bubbles out, it helps it slide down the sides of that cavity a little more. And there we go. So now I've got my first load of sawdust down there. And then now that super glue has entered the equation, I've got some napkins over here that I'm just gonna kind of make sure to keep everything wiped off. I don't want to accidentally stick something. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to time lapse. You're going to be able to see me kind of finish out filling this hole and kind of keep the super glue down in there. And then I'll come back and talk about the next step. So, all right, I'll see you back in a second. Everybody, there you have it. We are all done with filling that hole up with our sawdust glue kind of slurry mix. And I'll put up a picture here, a close-up picture, so you can kind of see really what it looks like. But the difference is you can see, I mean, on the one side, you clearly have the hole that's still good, that still has the screw holes in it. And then you see that we have just plugged that cavity with our sawdust mixture. And as I said at the beginning, the only thing we need to do now is when this fully dries and fully cures, we'll just put the faceplate back where it's supposed to go and just re-drill the central hole. Now, I know that super glue, makes the claim, hey, it's dry within 10 seconds and all this kind of stuff, but it's kind of getting late in the day when I'm filming this now, and just to be sure that everything is dried, I'm just gonna let this sit overnight. So I'll be back tomorrow to do the drilling part and show you how we can finish up this near catastrophe on the base. So, all right, for me, it'll be overnight, but for you, it'll be a few seconds. I'll be right back and we'll finish up this project. Hey everybody, I'm back. We let this sit overnight just like we were saying, and when I was checking it out just a second ago, I think we're in a good spot. I'm going to put up some pictures here because it's kind of hard to get close up, but when I first came in and inspected it this morning, you can see in the picture that when I looked really close that our patch job from yesterday kind of was this bulgy, messy kind of blob sticking up just above the surface. But that just means, we're working with sawdust and drops of super glue. It's gonna be kind of an amorphous glob. But I took some medium grit sandpaper, and after about 30 seconds of just lightly kind of sanding it away, now you can see from this close up, what that extra material allows us to do is to work back down towards an even level surface that will match the wood around it. And you can see from that picture, but also from here, now when I rub my finger over that spot, it's perfectly flat. It goes from the wood of the surrounding body, slides right over that, and I can't feel any kind of bumps or anything like that. So that means that we now have a plug that's kind of reconstituted down in there, and the only thing that's left to do is to re-drill the hole, the pilot hole, to let our screw kind of have a better seat. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the back, just like we did yesterday. I unscrewed the good screw and turned the faceplate so that I could be working on that hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn back the faceplate, and I've got the good screw, the good hole, the one that didn't break, that's lined up. And if you can see here, it's I'm just holding it with my finger in place. Now, this is where I want to put a mark. So I'm going to just double check. I got the existing screw hole lined up. So I've got a pen, and I'm just going to come down here, and on top of that nice flat surface, if I can get my pen to start working there. There we go. You know what? I'm going to actually put a divot. I'm going to use my screwdriver and put a divot because that super glue is making it pretty slick and slippery. There we go. So I used the tip of my screwdriver to kind of put a little, like a grounded divot in there so that I have a visual mark that I can come back and do my drilling. Now, a tip for when you're drilling any kind of cosmetic screw holes, if you're doing anything with a pick guard or you're doing things with maybe tuning pegs, something like that. You can see on this drill, I have actually put a piece of white tape. And before I turned on the video this morning, I took the screws that I knew were going into this hole and I held them up to the drill bit, right up to the head where I know that that's going to be the end of it. And I used my tape to mark where the bottom of the screw hole needs to be just for the length of screw. I don't want to start drilling just all, blindly, because I might poke through and get into cavities in here and mess up electronics. So I want to have exactly the right distance, just the right height for the screw that's going to go back into that hole. So that's a little tip for you whenever you're kind of doing this, delicate, touchy drilling kind of stuff. So now what I'm going to do is just actually physically do the drilling. So I'm going to get up here and I've got kind of a good work surface. I'm lining up, so my drill bit is now, it's in that little pilot divot that I made. And I've got this on the higher setting. And you look at it, you're like, wait, you're not level. I'm not level because the surface that I'm drilling on is actually off level. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm at the very least, I'm just perpendicular to the surface. And I think I'm pretty good right here. Perpendicular to the surface that I'm going into. So I'm going to start slow. There we go. And once I'm in, I got a good hold now. There it is. Okay. So if I blow that away, what I've got my pilot hole drilled back in there. So the last thing that's left to do, I'm going to line this back up, and all I've got to do are put in the two screws. We'll start with the good screw. We know this one was fine. This one didn't get torqued when I had the accident the other day. And so that one is back in and just finger tight. We don't have to get crazy about it. Now this is going to be the test for our patch work. Okay, good. I can already tell it's giving me resistance, and that initial resistance is going to be the threads of the screw having to recut new grooves into this plug of wood. It's kind of the way it works, like just if you're drilling into normal wood, you want to drill a hole that's slightly smaller than whatever screw you're putting in there so that the teeth, the threads of the screw can dig into that. And once you get kind of all the way, through that, then you kind of then the next threads are going to go through the grooves that the earlier threads cut. And this is good. It's given me a lot of, not resistance, but it's given me, like, this screw is digging into actual wood. So I'm actually going to get up here and use my elbow to get in there, which is a good sign, everybody. This was, as you saw the other day, this screw just fell right out, or I put pliers on it and just kind of gave it a slight tug and the thing fell straight out. So this is not going to come out anytime soon. So that's a really, really good sign. So we're almost there. Almost got it down. And I'm going to keep lining up. I keep checking my plate there. It kind of moves around back and forth a little bit until this gets all the way down. We're almost in, almost right up there. And there she is. I think we'll give it one more little nudge. There it is. And already I can tell that is stable. So the last test that we've got, I happen to have an instrument cable right here. So real quick, go in. I can wiggle this around. That's just the cable itself. That has nothing to do with the faceplate. Out, in, out. All right, crisis averted. Well, there you have it. We're able to finish off successfully an emergency repair on the input jack of this bass. Like we said at the beginning, if you ever are facing something like this, like an emergency patch job, this technique might be what you're looking for. So I hope you got something out of this video, and as always, thank you for watching, and until next time, play on, my friends, play on.